voters say Democrats are doing a better job on the issues of income inequality, health care, inflation, the economy, and foreign policy. It's a lot. Republicans do hold the advantage on crime and national security, although those are pretty closely divided. And yet, when it comes to immigration, Trump's signature issue, Republicans had an 8-point edge just a few months ago. But today, Democrats are preferred there as well. Meanwhile, 76% of those polled see the economy as only fair or poor, while just 24% say it's excellent or good. Meanwhile, 68% of Democrats say they're extremely motivated to vote in November. That's an 11-point edge on the percentage of Republicans who say the same. Let's bring in Politics Bureau Chief and Senior Political Columnist at Politico, Jonathan Martin. J-Mart, good to see you. Let's start with that enthusiasm answer. I mean, it's not surprising, considering how, in the eyes of Trump's base, or at least portions of his base, he's disappointed them in terms of his promises to fix the economy. He's disappointed them in his promises to avoid foreign wars as the Iran conflict continues to rage. And for some, he disappointed them in not being transparent in handling of the Epstein files. So Democrats are fired up right now, and that enthusiasm gap could play a big difference in November.
I'd add one more element, John. He hasn't forged the kind of legislative record or offered the sort of proposals for his final 2 years that may give some grist to his party for wanting to show up. I mean, if you think about it, the biggest bill that he's signed so far this year is one he wouldn't even sign, which was the housing legislation that the Congress passed. That he was so angry about the SAVE Act, he wouldn't even sign it. It still became law. Other than that, they're running on an extension of the 2017 tax cuts that they extended last year. And there's not much else besides, obviously, calling the Democrats extremist or communist, as Trump says. So he's not giving his base much in terms of what he's done. He's not proposing a lot to give them a reason to show up, to give members of Congress 2 more years or 6 more years for senators. And there's just this trend, John, as you know well from covering it for a decade, in which when Trump is not himself on the ballot, Democrats tend to do better because they show up with anti-Trump enthusiasm, and those who are Trump enthusiasts don't show up without his name bringing them out on top of the ballot.
Okay, so, J-Mart, answer this riddle for me then. We see that enthusiasm gap which favors the Democrats, and yet poll after poll shows us how unpopular the Democratic Party is as well. Even amongst Democrats, they're not happy with the party at the moment. So how do you square those two things?
Because every major institution in American life is unpopular right now, especially the 2 major political parties, but also because Democrats have what you guys can relate to. When the home sports team is losing, even the fans are mad at the team. And so if you ever listen to sports talk radio, the folks calling in are often the biggest fans of the team. They're the ones who are the most ticked off. And I think Democrats right now suffer from being disdained by the right for all the obvious reasons. Their own enthusiasts are mad at them for losing to Trump in the first place, or second place, I should add. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the broader swath of independent voters who are uneasy about Democrats because of the Biden-Harris experience and because of just not trusting them on a lot of policy issues. It doesn't leave a lot of positive sentiment around the political spectrum. But what matters in midterms is more negative energy than positive energy. Mm-hmm. And the party that can rally people against the opposition is the party that typically wins. We saw it in 2018, and I think it's taking place here again. That said, Democrats can't be so unpopular and so dreaded that people are going to be uneasy about showing up at all and say, I'll pox on both houses. But that is the gift that keeps on giving, guys, that is Donald Trump. He's just enough to get folks to show up and vote reluctantly, but vote for Democrats.
So, J-Mart, it looks as if Trump's idea of the Republican message, which will be picked up, I think, by the rest of the party, is they're all communists.
Yes.
It's a Red Scare message, basically. Right. I kind of wondered, in general, whether that has the potency that it once might have had when there was actual communism in the world.
Yes.
But that seems to be their story, and they're going to stick to it because they don't have anything else. Do Democrats have, what's the Democratic message that you can sort of boil down into, you know, Red Scare, they're communists, or that sort of punchy, quick message?
2 words: stop Trump. Stop Trump. I mean, actually, it's one word. It says Trump, right? I mean, look, Democrats have lived off of that. He's been the organizing, the cohesive factor for Democrats for 10 years now. He's their best organizer, fundraiser, mobilizer, and unifier. What coheres a coalition, Gene, that ranges from the Cheneys to Bernie Sanders and AOC? Well, it's one thing. It's not ideological vision. It's we're against the Trump project in America. And I think Democrats are going to rely on that playbook one more time. And actually, maybe not one more time. I think they're going to keep trying to run against Trump for as long as they can. And by the way, for good reason. He is the biggest driver in American politics, certainly at his party and perhaps even around the world. So it makes sense that that would be the message. It's unifying. It tends to work. And I think that's what they're going to do. Now, on the sort of communist side, just saying that the Dems are communists, it reminds me of an adage a lot of us know from covering campaigns, which is when campaigns don't have an obvious message, they tend to live off the land. Whatever their opponents give them on a given day or a week, they seize on. And I think that's what the GOP is doing now. They don't have an agenda for Trump's final 2 years. They don't have much to run on from the last 2 years, except the tax bill. And so they're just living off the land. What is giving? What's on offer? And what's on offer is, oh my gosh, some DSA candidates won primaries. The mayor of the biggest city in the country is a socialist. Well, obviously, we're going to grab that, plug and play, and run against them as communists.
Yeah, and at least so far, there's no sign that that's working. And certainly the Republicans not presenting any actual ideas, any concepts to making people's lives better. We just saw in that poll even that one of Trump's signature issues, immigration, that poll, Democrats are favored, and especially we've seen these acts of violence as ICE operations have ramped up in American cities in recent weeks.